It can be super helpful to see examples of how others have sort of landed on their UVPs. So I have five here to kind of walk you through. Originally, this person said they were an installation artist, but what they really do is disrupt the expected environment with large-scale paintings and installations. You can see disrupt is a much more impactful verb. They wanted to emphasize what was being disrupted, the expected environments, and then they wanted to talk about their work, large scale paintings and installations, right? That's how they are disrupting the expected environment and also describing the type of work they do. For the second example, this person is a photographer, videographer, and they shared, I explore racial and gender binaries through introspective documentary photography and video. And we went back and forth a lot around the specific words they chose here because introspective documentary photography doesn't really roll off the tongue, but they were very clear on the meanings behind those words, and they were very specific about why they wanted to use those words. And after all, it's their UVP, so they have to be the one that's most comfortable with it, right? So even though it doesn't really roll off my tongue, it's totally fine for it to be their UVP. Explore is the verb they landed on, and they wanted to highlight racial and gender binaries. That is certainly what is being explored, but it also teases a little bit to the why behind their work. And then they wanted to describe their work using these very clear, specific, intentional words. This student or this person is a teaching artist, and what they really do is surprise their own students by combining Lady Gaga and Bach. That's so much more interesting and really capturing the value of their work as a teaching artist, introducing music theory and the consistencies in music over time to these young students. So surprise is the verb they landed on, and they wanted to emphasize the who. Who do they surprise? Students. That's who they serve. And then what do? They combine two artists that feel like they don't have anything in common, but actually follow generally the same musical structure, right? So that's a really interesting way to capture the real value of what they do. And it doesn't have to be limiting. Yes, they're naming Lady Gaga and Bach, but they can also combine all sorts of different types of musicians and types of genres of music, right? So they wanted to land on something very sort of quippy that felt like they could say it in a really sort of humorous way, combining Lady Gaga and Bach. But what they really do is much broader than just those two specific artists. This person is a dance instructor. They lead dance workshops, right? When I normally say, what do you do? They were like, oh, I lead dance workshops. What they really do is transform the way people move through the world. Transform is the verb they settled on, and they wanted to emphasize who, people, and then also at the same time capture what is being transformed. It's the way people move through the world. And as they have leaned into different audiences, they've described this slightly differently. So they have transformed the way people with Parkinson's move through the world, and they have transformed the way people in assisted living facilities move through the world. And even during the pandemic, they transformed the way essential workers moved through the world through healing movement workshops, right? So you can adapt the starting point based on what suits you at any given moment in time or what you want to emphasize. This example leads with the name of the group, which I have made up, by the way. It is not the band from the 90s. It's a pretend made up group that amplifies the power of nature through song. This group does arts in the parks types of projects in their state, but they don't just simply perform around trees. They amplify the power of nature through song. And they wanted to use a noun or a subject describing their group as opposed to naming them as individuals. They also landed on the word amplify because it sort of hinted at a musical reference and then also hinted at making something bigger, right? So those two aspects of the word really captured something unique about their work. And they wanted to emphasize the why of what they do, which of course is the power of nature. And they wanted to name also their how through songs and musical performance. So all these pieces came together and they landed on a UVP that really did feel like it captured the real magic of what they did. Sometimes, though, as you're going through this, it can feel like this is something that you would never say out loud, right? Because it can feel a little awkward. And some of that is just practice, right? Sometimes it becomes more natural with more practice. And maybe you have a version that lives in printed form or on your website in digital form, and then you have a slightly more conversational version that you can say out loud. That is perfectly fine. Or if practice and sort of adaptation isn't really working, maybe that's a sign that you still need some work crafting the underlying UVP itself. Because ultimately we want it to land somewhere where it does feel like it's capturing you and it does feel like something you would say out loud. After reviewing these examples, it's a good time to share your UVP out loud with someone you trust. What you're looking for is your own UVP concise and is it easy to say? Does it feel like it's accurately capturing you and your work? And this is where that trusted friend or peer can give some really helpful feedback about whether they feel like it is really accurately capturing you. And then we also want this to be memorable. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering, but it's helpful if it's memorable and interesting and an invitation to continue the conversation. I hope these examples have been helpful. Feel free to go back and revisit them as you continue crafting your own UVP.